Eni Aluko was not wrong, and I'm here to tell you why. If you don't know what Eni Aluko was talking about pre-game England versus Serbia, where England came away as 1-0 winners, she was talking about the possibility of playing with two number 10s and one that drops a little bit deeper than the other. She named Bellingham for that particular role. If you want to hear what she says, here it is.
So there's a gap in his experience. It feels like a risk to me. I would rather see the risk taken higher up the pitch. I want to see Foden in that 10. I'm part of that fan club. I want to see Bellingham in the 10 and trust that Rice can deal with it on his own in that midfield with Bellingham dropping down. That's what I would prefer to see. That's what I want to see.
That is what Eni Aluko had to say. Now, I could talk for days on days on days about tactics, and for me, I don't think she's wrong in what she's saying. I completely understand the idea behind what she's saying, but the problem we have is the way she explained it. What she was explaining was having two number 10s, one that drops in a little deeper, essentially wouldn't necessarily sit beside Declan Rice, would sit ahead Declan Rice in a 2 with the other number 10 that she mentioned, which was Phil Foden. And to be honest with you, that is what England did for a majority of the game. And the thing that people didn't sort of take from it is that it wasn't wrong. Getting Foden and Bellingham centrally only provides England with more creative opportunities in those positions. But the problem that we have was people didn't understand the 10 dropping in. Now, if you play two 10s, one of them has to sacrifice going forward naturally. It's just the way the game works. If you've got two players in those same sort of positions, both going the same way, it's very predictable. It's easy to defend against. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below or in this top corner to stay tuned for all of my latest Euro 2024 and Derby County content. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments on what Eni Aluko said in the pre-match build-up to the England-Serbia game. I don't think she was wrong, as you'll find out throughout this video, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments. You just sort of let them play the like you either drop off and cover the channels, or you just press up and hit them with the trap essentially. And the difference that England had today that Eni Aluko didn't mention was that midfield 2 of Declan Rice and Trent Alexander-Arnold, because what we was essentially doing in possession was we had sort of like a back 3, then a box with the two wing backs high and wide, and I thought it worked really well within the first half. Well, I say two wing backs. You had Saka on one side, Trippier on the other, and your 3 was Walker, Stones and Guéhi, with Rice and Trent in the middle. And then Trent sort of had that free roll to go from side to side to pick up the ball and whatnot. And then you had Foden come narrow, Bellingham was narrow. Like, for me, I think what Eni Aluko was talking about is exactly what happened in the game. I just think she failed to explain it correctly. Obviously, for the goal, you saw Saka was high and wide. You had Bellingham and Foden narrow. Foden was further ahead than Bellingham. There's that being a bit deeper than your other number 10. And I think, personally, what she said wasn't wrong. You've obviously got to counteract it. You've got to talk. You've got to go a bit more in depth as a pundit for me. And that's something which I think sometimes she fails to do. She says a few things which, like, in my opinion, she can say some really good things, but then she, like, takes away from all of that by missing out key information that makes it understandable. And for this instance, that is what she did. She didn't explain what she meant by having one drop deeper. She didn't explain what she meant by having Rice behind sweeping up. And for me, I think the way Southgate set up, I don't think he's going to set up like that again. I have a feeling that Trent won't play in midfield once we get to the knockout rounds. And I have a feeling that we're going to end up seeing Anthony Gordon or Jared Bowen on that left-hand side. Nothing against Foden and nothing against Trippier. I just think that on that left-hand side, that always cutting in, which we had from Kieran Trippier, just didn't quite work. And then obviously you've got Foden, who was coming narrow, so you had all that space available. If Trippier wasn't forward, you didn't have anyone in that space. And obviously you've got Saka on the other side holding the width, with Walker staying narrow as more of like a right-sided centre-half. But for me, I think we missed a key element in midfield, and I think when Conor Gallagher came on, I think he added that bite into midfield, especially towards the latter stages of the game. And if we go back to the 2 10s conversation, if we're going to play with 2 narrow number 10s essentially behind Harry Kane, then what we've got to do is have the right midfielder behind, or the right midfield two behind. Because we could play how we played today, but I think you then need to have a left-footed left-back going up. You can't have Trippier who's going to cut in every time, because it becomes too predictable. Then players don't go with him down the line. And I think we saw that a few times tonight, was Trippier was getting into some really good positions on that left-hand side, and Foden and Bellingham would sort of stay narrow in a normal circumstance with a left-footed left wing-back, left-back, whatever you want to call it. The runners would track all the way to try and block across, and that would open up space on the edge of the box for a Foden, for a Bellingham, for a Harry Kane to get a shot off, and that just didn't happen because of that lack of a left footer. Now, I'm dying for Luke Shaw to be fit. At least needs to get some minutes before the knockout rounds. You can't just chuck him in for 90 minutes in knockouts, in my opinion. But I do think that 2-10s is exactly what we did tonight, and people won't admit it because it's Eni Aluko, and I understand she's a polarising figure in punditry, especially across English football. She says some weird things. I think on occasion she likes to play the victim, but ultimately she was absolutely correct with what Southgate did. We had a very fluid front three, arguably, well, front four, maybe five if you had Trippier into that, where there was times where Saka was over on the left, Foden was coming across to the right, Bellingham was everywhere. You obviously then had Trent, who realistically, up until he came off, wasn't really in a position. There was times he was out at right back. There was times he was over on the left. There was times he was sort of the highest central midfielder, and that's something which, as England fans, people need to take into account, that we need this fluidity so that we're unpredictable. And I personally don't think that Trent Alexander-Arnold will play in midfield past the group stage. Nothing against Trent. I just think he lacks a bit of situational awareness. Don't get me wrong, I think he played really well tonight, but I think he dropped off a bit in that second half. You've then also got to think that when you're playing those better teams, they're going to have midfielders that are going to that could dominate, and you've got to think you want to put your best foot forward. And for me, if we're going to put our best foot forward, it's not having a Declan Rice and Trent Alexander-Arnold partnership in midfield. It's probably more than likely a Declan Rice, Conor Gallagher behind Jude Bellingham, or a Declan Rice, Kobbie Mainoo, depending on who we're playing against. Because you look at France and some of the midfielders they've got. You look at some of the midfielders in the Portuguese side, in the I've already said French, in the Spanish side. Like, there's some really good players in this European competition, and even tonight I felt like we was sort of, I don't want to say overloaded in midfield because I don't want to sound like a football manager cliche, but I do think in midfield at times we were outnumbered and outpositioned, and I think we've got a couple of players who like to cheat defensively, especially as the counter's building. You'll have players who will sort of stay, and then you've got players that will run all the way in. And I think when we're playing those better teams, the likes of Conor Gallagher will have to get in the side. And obviously the main point of this video was Eni Aluko's 2-10s discussion, and for me, I don't think she said anything wrong. I personally think she was absolutely spot on in what she was saying. Do I necessarily think that that's the way England should play going forward? I think there's a potential for it to work, but you've got to have the right left side. Even with Foden on that left-hand side, you've then got to have the right left back to work with it. And for me, I personally think we'd go much better by having that whole middle space available for either a Jude Bellingham or a Phil Foden, not both of them together. And even if you bring in someone like Cole Palmer to come and take up those spaces, you're going to have the same issues as what I felt we had tonight, where it was a bit congested in the middle of the park. You had, when we pinned Serbia back, we had Declan Rice, Phil Foden, Jude Bellingham, Trent, all in sort of that box between the 18-yard box and the centre circle. And that is where you get your problems in these tactical positions, because although it's a really good tactical shape and a really good tactical position, as Derby County fans, we know, because that's a system we played throughout parts of this season with your 2-10s and your box midfield with 2 centre mids and 2 high wing backs. And I think there's a way to do it, but you're always taking something away from someone's game. You'll never play two tens where both of the tens are creative and attacking, because you have to be wary of that defensive element that comes into the out of possession side of things. And although that box sort of tightens up the midfield and makes it easier to win the ball back higher up the pitch, it also then leaves a lot of space out wide, especially for England on that left hand side. With Kieran Trippier, where he's not really got any cover. He's not got anyone who could drop in for him, and that's where you have to go to that back three at in possession, because then one of your centre backs pushes over to the left. You've got a central and a right, but then you've got to make sure you don't get overloaded on the counter. So there's lots of tactical elements to this style of play, which we did see in parts tonight, in my opinion, and I think Eni Aluko was spot on with it. I think she failed to really give a proper explanation to what she was talking about. But what we saw tonight was Foden come narrow, Bellingham a little bit more to one side, the two tens, one a bit higher, one a bit lower. Ultimately, I don't think it works right now, but I think it could be under the right manager. I think that could be a problem here. Under the right manager, I think it's absolutely a perfect system, and it would work amazingly with the set of players we've got, but I don't think it would work with Trent in midfield, because you've got to be very careful in that midfield area of how you play the box. If one of your players is even 5 yards out of position to the right or to the left, it ultimately changes the entire complexion of the tactic and the way it's set up. So for me, although Eni Aluko failed to explain, and a lot of people had a problem with that, I think she was on the right lines. I think we saw what she was explaining pre-game within the game on numerous occasions. So it'll be very interesting to see how England set up in the next game. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below or in this top corner to stay tuned to all of my latest Derby County Euro 2024 content. I have done a review of the games and preview of the upcoming games this morning, so make sure you do go and check that out on the channel. That'll have gone out at about 10 o'clock this morning, so make sure you go onto the channel, check out that video. It'll be the one before this one. So if you have not done so already, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and I'll catch you in my next video. Make sure to go and follow me on TikTok, pictured here, and Twitter, pictured here. These are the places where I'll keep you all up to date with all my upcoming videos and my thoughts and feelings around the Formula 1 and football weekend.